Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Fosselt. I serve as the board administrator for the Texas State Board of Marriage and Family Therapists. Let me try that. I'd like to call the roll. Dr. Merchant,
Present.
Dr. Barty,
Present.
Dr. Elder,
Present.
Ms. Richardson,
Present.
Ms. Reyna, Mr. Hampton,
Present.
Ms. Ezell.
Present.
Mr. Parrish indicated that he could not attend. And we are vacant one member, so we have a quorum.
Okay,
Did
thank
I
you.
miss anyone?
Okay, well then, is this where I get to use the gavel? At 1:08,
Sure.
I officially call this meeting to order. Okay. So agenda item number 2 is welcome. So welcome board members and staff to our board meeting. Also welcome anybody listening through Zoom. So just thank you and welcome to our meeting. Agenda item number 3 is public comment. And so at this time, I'm going to open up the floor to public comment. We don't have anybody present in the room. Sarah, do we have any Zoom public comment?
So if you're attending by computer, please raise your hand. Please note that public comment has a limit of 3 minutes for each individual. The public comment period is not intended for a discussion and answer session or discussion with the board, but simply to inform the board of your views and your comments. And as soon as Dr. Merchant noted, no one here is in the room, so we'll go with those who are attending by computer. The raised hand feature is usually at the bottom navigation bar of your Zoom screen. And if there's anyone attending by phone, when we get to you, I'll call on those attending by computer first and then look for anyone attending by phone. And if you're attending by phone, then I'll ask you to unmute and if you have public comment. And you'll use usually *6 to unmute. Madre's computer, you have a comment? Can you unmute for us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
A little louder?
Yes, my name is Jennifer Ellis, and I'm speaking individually. I would like to call attention to an LPC board agreed order for John Wells that was approved and ratified by the council on January 15th of this month. The agreed order has a finding of fact stating the respondent had a sexual relationship with a client and resulted in a voluntary resignation of his LPC license. Mr. Wells is, as of a moment ago, still an active LMFT license holder with supervisory status. This causes the appearance of the board not being as alert to the severity of sexual misconduct as the behavior and outcomes warrant. It has the potential to cause ongoing distress to the complainant in the case, as well as to continue exposing members of the public to potential harm. I would like to ask this board to consider disciplinary action against Mr. Wells' LMFT license as expeditiously as possible. In addition, I would like to ask all boards under the Behavioral Health Council to consider process improvements for communication between boards when dealing with complaints against dual license holders. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis.
And just for the board's edification, staff, we will thank you for this comment. We will take it and we will make sure appropriate action is taken and report back to you.
Thank you very much.
Kathleen Mills, you have public comment?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Kathleen Mills, co-creator of the Association for Mental Health Professionals. Our profession is deeply divided right now, thanks to almost entirely to our academic output of the last 20 years. Competent grad students are leaving and changing their career paths because they don't want to put up with the abuse they're taking in their university classrooms, and these are not isolated at all. Our board does not need to be flaming the fires of division with DEI initiatives like the 3-hour cultural diversity requirement. This requirement was sold to all 4 BHEC boards by the SHCC committee as both a competence issue and a workforce shortage Band-Aid solution. Liberals redefined competence to more closely align with their DEI mindset, and the counselors were then blamed for the perceived workforce shortage, which is really about workforce access and has nothing to do with cultural competence. They're saying licensed therapists with master's degrees, which included cultural training, aren't competent anymore, and the workforce shortage is proof of that. Recruiting is academia's responsibility, guiding the right people into professions where there is a need for them. When did that become my job? The entire premise upon which this need was sold to you was an agenda-driven lie. Since the January 20th inauguration of Donald Trump, the federal government is actively purging DEI from every federal agency and department, including the education system. Our state legislator and governor's offices are actively purging DEI from our universities with the passage of SB 17. There's currently a bill before the legislature to expand that requirement to include university curriculums. It's obvious that the state and our people who voted in the current legislator want DEI removed from anything under the state's control. So as I see it, this board has 2 options. You can wait until the governor's office eventually tells you to remove any DEI-driven efforts within our rule book, or take the initiative during this closing act of the quadrennial review and eliminate the 3-hour CE requirement for cultural diversity immediately without having been told. If someone wants to take this course, they are free to do so. Don't add this on to extra things that I already understand. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm Philip Crum, Texas citizen and co-creator of AMP, the Association for Mental Health Professionals. The state of Texas has a lot of work to do. At this very moment, the Texas Medical Board's trying to take the medical license of Dr. Mary Talley Bowden. Her crime was to speak up in favor of COVID treatments that authorities still don't want anyone to talk about, like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. Dr. Bowden's nightmare continues to unfold. The state of Texas passed Senate Bill 14 2 years ago, which defined the surgical mutilation of minors under the guise of affirming care as child abuse. They ordered all hospitals to cease those activities. Dr. Etan Heim blew the whistle on the state's largest hospital system, and despite whistleblower law protections, has been persecuted in the legal system for the last 2 years. His crime was informing the state of Texas that a hospital system lied to the public about its operations and continued to mutilate children for profit. His next court date is February 10th in Houston, and he's facing the loss of his medical license and 10 years in prison simply for doing the right thing. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that everything is sunshine and roses at BHEC, but I do think we have the right administrative staff to become a shining example for other Texas licensing boards and the court systems. What we can do is make sure that all 4 of our mental health boards aren't promoting any aspect of the woke agenda, including the DEI initiative in our rule book. After all, that's what the people, the legislature, and the governor's office want. Now, the governor's office doesn't like to be bothered with its various agencies' board issues, and they don't like it a lot. And with the gubernatorial reelection campaign starting up in about 12 months, I'm sure the last thing they want to hear about is a DEI-driven requirement in those rule books for their mental health licensing boards. You know, the boards with the workforce shortage. But if this issue isn't resolved quickly, they're going to hear about it. It's my civic duty to my kids and grandkids. The BHEC administrative staff's done a wonderful job of cleaning up and standardizing the 4 board rule books, but the glaringly obvious DEI requirement on cultural diversity needs to be eliminated, and now. Put it on your agenda for the next meeting. Do whatever's required, but let's get it done. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Crum. I see no other hands raised. If you wish to give public comment, you can find the raise hand feature in the lower navigation bar of your screen. In the meantime, I do see a caller. That's our number. Okay. One of our guys. So seeing no other hands raised and no other callers, I believe that ends public comment.
Okay, then we will move on to agenda item number 4. And so 4A is report from the board chair, which would be me. I guess I have had some things that have been on my heart, in my mind recently, or for a while now. And I'm very nervous and anxious to talk about some of these things in a public forum. I have talked about them with my students, but my students and I, it's different than talking about it publicly. But I want to share with y'all a couple of stories that I think, I just want to share with y'all a couple of stories. So when I graduated from ACU and I got my very first big girl job, it was working for a domestic violence shelter. And I had been there for 2 weeks when we had a resident who had to go to another city to testify against her abuser. And so she went to this other city to testify, and we had a policy at the shelter that if you were going to be absent for more than 2 or 3 days from the shelter, that you had to fill out a form. And she, for whatever reason, didn't fill out the form. And our policy was if anybody was gone for more than 2 or 3 days and they hadn't filled out the form, then we would take all of their belongings and we would put them in trash bags and we would throw them away. And so I went to my supervisor and I said, what do? We know where she's at. We know when she'll be back. We know what she's doing, but she didn't fill out the form. And my supervisor said, if she didn't fill out the form, then you're going to take all of her belongings and you're going to put them in the dumpster. And so being that I was 22 years old and this was my very first job, I did as my supervisor instructed. And so we loaded up all of her belongings, all of her clothes, all of her baby books, all of her Social Security cards, everything, and we threw it away. And so that's my first story. My second story was several years later. I was doing community mental health, and my job was to screen people to see if they needed to be involuntarily committed to a psychiatric hospital. And so one night, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I got a call to go out to a hospital. And when I arrived, the sales representative from the local psychiatric hospital and the ER doctor, like when I walked in, they just both told me, we've already screened her. She needs to be in a psychiatric hospital. We just need you to do the paperwork. And I said, well, I have to do my own screening. So I did my own screening, and I did not think that she met the criteria to be involuntarily hospitalized. The ER doctor, as I was getting ready to leave, called my supervisor and then talked to my supervisor. And then my supervisor got on the phone with me and he said, you need to commit her. And I did, so instead of doing, anyways, I did. So I committed her to the psychiatric hospital, even though she technically didn't meet the criteria for it. And I tell these two stories to my students because I try to encourage them to one day have moral courage, that whenever they are faced with similar situations, that they will also stand up and do the right thing. I have spent 20 years reflecting on these stories and trying to figure out what I could have or should have done different in these situations. And to be honest, I don't know that I have ever come to a satisfactory answer. I don't know if I should have just advocated for my clients better. I don't know if I should have just quit and resigned right there on the spot. I don't know if I did the right thing by sticking around and trying to make a difference in the systems in which I was living and working. But that's actually not the point of me telling y'all these stories. The point is, these two stories were both very formative for me. And they bestowed in me a strong sense of justice and fairness and protection for our clients. And to kind of bring this full circle, where I'm going with all this is that like, when I took this job, when I joined the board, I'm going to be honest, I did it on a whim. I didn't have this like grand sense of purpose or anything. I just had been going to board meetings and I thought it looked like fun. I thought, man, it'd be so cool to kind of like be up there, like doing this thing. And so I just casually mentioned to Jennifer Smotherman, my predecessor, I just said, if there's ever, if you'll ever have an opening, let me know. And then it turns out they actually had an opening. And so 2 months later, I was on the board. And so it wasn't honestly until my first training with Sarah and Mr. Spear that I realized that like our board is about protection. That is what we do. That is what we have been. That's what we were on this board for, is to protect the public. And I know that sometimes our rules might seem cumbersome to our licensees, perhaps, but like at the heart of everything that we do is public protection. That is what we are trying to do. And thinking back to like I teach our research methods class. And one of the things that we talk about in our research methods class is who bears the burden of research. That when we're doing research, are the people who are benefiting from our research, are they also the people who are bearing the burden of the research? Does that make sense? Like, are our research participants, the people who are bearing the burden, are they also the ones who are going to benefit? And I think about that even with our work here at the board, that like, sometimes licensees do have to bear the burden in order to protect their clients. But I feel like we do a good job of balancing that we do not ever try to overburden our licensees, that we consider that. We consider public protection along with the burden that we're asking our licensees to bear. And so anyways, this just has been on my heart for a while. And I just really just wanted to reinforce this idea that that's what we are here for, is we are here to protect the public. I don't know. I don't know why that was on my mind. That's on my mind. So questions, comments, thoughts? I'm not getting this from the attorneys, so I think I'm okay. Okay. The other thing that I want to say is,
Wait, I don't want that poignant moment to pass without comment.
okay.
Thank you for that reminder of the important function that we serve. And that is our role, even if we as professional members also bear that burden.
Yeah. Thank you.
Unmute.
I think we're also protecting our licensees. Right? I think that
Mhm.
that yes, we are here to protect the vulnerable. That's who we all serve professionally. But I think we're also here to protect our licensees as best we can. Obviously, the client's needs have to come first, and there do need to be reasonable hoops that clinicians need to jump through in order to prove that they're able to protect the public and the clients that they serve. But I agree.
Well, even some of our rules that are designed to protect the public, when licensees follow them, they are also protecting themselves. So, okay. Next, I want to move on, and I just want to extend my sincerest gratitude towards our staff. I have worked and volunteered with a number of organizations. And I just have to say that the level of competency and professionalism exhibited by our staff is like, it's out of this world. Like, I have never worked with people so competent and so professional and so passionate about their jobs as I have on this board. I think I want to extend a special thank you to both Robert and Patrick. They are like, y'all are just brilliant lawyers. Y'all are brilliant attorneys. I think that you can write a rule to fit any situation. But I think what I love most about the two of you specifically is the way that you listen. That whenever we come to y'all with a need or a problem, like, you actually hear what it is, like the heart of what we are going for, and you try to write rules that match that heart. And so I just greatly appreciate the work the two of you do for us. I just greatly appreciate the work that you two do. I wish that our licensing staff, they're amazing too. But I don't know our licensing staff. I was going to say our investigators. I wish that our investigators and Mr. Clark were here because they also do amazing work. And I've always been just greatly appreciative of how hard they work for us. I, of course, I'm always and forever grateful to Sarah as our board administrator. She is both colleague and friend. And anyways, her attention to detail, her organization, just her passion for the work that she does. Like, it's just, anyways, y'all are just truly amazing. And I just appreciate y'all very much. So just thank y'all for the work that you do. Next, let's see here. Sorry, my board report's kind of long today. I apologize. I guess I also just want to thank our board members. I'm so grateful that all of y'all have chosen to serve with us. I have really appreciated the committee meetings that I've had, especially with our newest board members. I love the way that you four are just like jumping in. You're asking questions, especially our public members who are sometimes learning our profession. I appreciate the way that y'all ask questions, especially when you don't know something and you just, anyways, I just appreciate y'all very much and the contributions that y'all are already making to this board. I really appreciate you, Nicole, for the work that you've done on our supervision guidance document that we're putting together, your willingness to present with me at TAMFT, and again, just the ideas and energy that you bring. So thank you very much for that. Jody, you are fantastic and amazing. I've known you the longest. I really appreciate your also attention to detail. I mean, I really seriously think that you read every single word of every single board packet. And like our board packet had like 100 items in it. And I'm pretty sure that you read every word of it. Anyways, I really appreciate that about you. I also just want to say, to get a little bit personal, I remember when my dad died. And you were just we didn't even know each other. And yet you were a good friend to me. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for that. Russ, I need to announce right now, I'm sorry. Russ has actually decided not to be reappointed. So his term expires in February. And I'm very sad. I wish I would have, I told you this a second ago, I wish I would have known so that I could have forced you to present with me at TAMFT this year, because last year we had so much fun doing it together. So anyways, I greatly appreciate your service on the board. I appreciate the wisdom that you've brought, the humor that you've brought. And I'm going to miss you. We're all going to miss you. Janine has also officially resigned her position due to just personal issues in her life. Janine has been just an amazing board member with her wisdom, with her directness, with her, she just has political, I don't know, she's amazing. She understands the way systems work, especially from a political standpoint, and she's just fabulous. And I am truly sad. She was an asset to the board, so I'm going to miss her as well. And so my last item that I have for my board report is I do want to take a minute and just talk about a future board endeavor. I do think that probably one of the things I would like for the board to tackle next is doing some sort of survey of our licensees regarding their experiences with supervision. Essentially, we have gotten complaints or concerns have been expressed about supervisees being taken advantage of, but also supervisors feeling like they aren't empowered to actually serve as gatekeepers. And so I do think it would be important. I don't know how widespread this is. So I do think that it would be important for us to maybe do some surveying of our licensees to figure out how widespread this is and if there is anything that we as professionals need to do. So anyways, questions, comments, thoughts about any of the things that I've put in my board report?
We'll miss you, Russ.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then that concludes my board report. Thank y'all for listening.
One question.
Yes.
Who would be in charge of putting the survey?
I think that might be a rules committee thing. Does that sound like a rules committee?
With supervision, you might have the option to send it to the Licensing Standards Committee, or you might have the option to send it to, I imagine rules might be pertinent. They would then take the information if you wish to
See, I was
collaborate into
debating.
rules.
I was debating between licensing standards and rules for those very reasons. I was thinking the reason I kind of landed on rules is because eventually that would be where we would go with this is do any of our rules need to be changed based on this survey or added or amended or removed or, are there barriers? Are there just, you know what I mean? And so, but again, okay, wait, you'll have to remind me, who's on the rules committee? Okay, who's on licensing standards? Okay. And looking at our rules committee and our licensing standards committee, is there anybody on those committees who's like, yeah, no, I totally want to take this, or please don't make me take this? Like, we'll just,
This is also a conversation that's happening with the other boards as well. So
yeah.
I'm, well, that they are having questions the same as y'all. They're not, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to take a first approach of the survey draft.
Well, okay. Well, let me just, anyway, you're welcome to do that, of course. I guess from our last kind of BHEC rules committee meeting, I kind of got the impression that the other boards maybe weren't interested in doing a survey. And so that's why I thought maybe MFT would just run with it.
Which I think is a good idea.
Okay.
I thought we started one, didn't we?
Not for supervision.
Okay, no.
Well, could you and I tackle it together?
Of course.
Okay. Well, then Robert and I will tackle it together, and then we'll figure out which committee it goes to. Cool beans. Okay. Next item on our agenda. Unless there's any other question, comments, or thoughts, reflection, anything.
I like the idea of surveying regarding supervision. I think it's a very relevant topic, and I appreciate you bringing that up and leading the charge.
Yeah, cool. Okay, then it is time for our report from our board delegates, the Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council. Me and Robert maybe might take this. I don't know. I can take this, some of it anyways. Janine has resigned, and so she did not attend the last board meeting or BHEC meeting, and so she obviously is not here to make a report. And then Mr. Parrish today had he was out of town, and he thought he was going to be back in time for this meeting, and it did not work, and so he was not here today. So I have actually been standing in for Janine in the Rules Committee meetings. I have not attended a BHEC meeting in her stead, but I have been attending the Rules Committee meetings. And essentially, we've been discussing mostly supervision and basically if there are things that need to be standardized across boards related to supervision. For example, should we limit the number of people associates that can be in a group, group supervision, just having conversations around those kinds of things. It seems to me that staff has been, again, they've been doing a really good job of kind of listening to the different boards. And I think they're going to take that information and then try to maybe write some rules and then bring it back to the respective boards. Does that sound about right, Robert?
That's right.
Okay, cool. Okay. Anything else that you want to add about that?
I'm trying to think
I
of
can
it.
add for the public that in the summary in your meeting materials, there's a listing of rules that became effective November 14th. And they have been updated in the consolidated rule books. Thank you to Ms. Brenda Skiff for doing those. They were posted on November 22nd, if I remember correctly. Also in the summary is a list of rules that were published proposed rules that were published on December 29th. So I'm sorry, they were published on November 29th and the public comment period ended on December 29th. So they're before this board on this agenda as well. And then there's some other items that I thought the board and the public should be informed of that were presented at the council meeting in October.
And so I'd kind of like to go through some of those things that were in the board packet. Well, I guess, really, actually, let me just open up to you guys. What questions do y'all have? Like all the things that were under agenda item, whatever agenda item we're on. What are we?
4B.
4B. Is there, I guess, what kind of discussion questions do you have? Nicole, go for it.
I do have a question about rule number 5 about temporary license.
Mm-hmm.
So if I understand this correctly, someone who is not licensed in the state of Texas, but who holds an MFT license in another state
Mm-hmm.
can apply for a license to practice independently in Texas for 30 days, but it's not 30 continuous days. It's 30 days out of 365 days.
Mm.
And so I'm curious about how this is tracked and who this is designed for.
It is designed for people who are licensed in another state and they have a client who's in Texas temporarily. So
Okay.
yeah, so like if they have a college student who's home for summer,
Got it.
if they have a client who's, going to be in Houston for 6 weeks visiting family or at a job site or something like that. Basically, it's to ensure continuity of care for, again, somebody who's licensed in another jurisdiction but has a client who is temporarily in Texas.
My follow-up question
Yeah.
then is about fees.
Mhm.
How on earth would that person know? Like, do they pay the same fee that I pay to renew my license? What?
That is a staff question.
Could you repeat the question a little closer to your mic?
So then my follow-up question is about fees. Is that listed somewhere else in the board rules?
There's a fee rule, and it's, I believe, $150. It's not it's not the full licensure fee because it's
Got
a
it.
temporary license, and that the fee is modeled after psychology has a temporary license application. It's the same fee for if you're getting a temporary psychology license or a temporary MFT license.
Yeah.
I believe, is it 150, Robert?
103.
103. Sorry.
So
So the regular license is 161 and the temporary is 103. So it is a little.
it's $103, and they fill out the application online and all that jazz. And then, so if I wanted to verify that person's license online, I could verify it the same way I would verify my own
Correct.
So I believe they show up in our Versa system.
and it would say like
Temporary,
temporary
yeah.
license holder.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I also had a follow-up question on that issue.
Mhm.
I know we talked last time about the database being up and running and being able to support the new licensure. I'm just curious where we're at with the database collecting and gathering and tracking all of that data.
Of the temporary
Mhm.
license, we've already been issuing them. They are.
Oh, it's done.
It's done.
Okay.
It was, in fact, now that we're past it, we can tell on ourselves a little bit. It actually went live before the rule was passed. So we got
Oh.
applications before it even was a thing.
Way
So
to
how
go,
many-
team.
How many have we issued? Just any idea?
A handful.
Okay.
I don't know exactly, but I'd say less than a dozen.
Okay, cool.
Just
But
more
still.
proof that you guys are amazing.
I know, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of amazing, I wanted to add under this particular topic was thank you to the staff for being continuously available to our stakeholders. I really do believe that the leadership listening hour and the insights over lunch, I think that makes a huge difference in reducing misinterpretations of new rules and also allowing us as a board to get feedback about what are the hot topics that we might need to be looking at. And that's all because of the time and energy you're putting into that. And I greatly appreciate it.
Any other questions, comments about anything from the things that were in our board packet under 4B? Okay, then we are going to move on to agenda item C, report from the board administrator and other staff.
So I included for the board members' consideration a number of items, including this Texas Statewide Health Coordinating Council's report. If there's any questions that you have, be happy to entertain those questions.
I do have one question. This is Barbie Ezel. On 4BC2, on sheet 3, it looks like there's a typo. It says Texas Funeral Service Commission.
That is correct.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay.
That is just an old
Okay.
tab.
just checking.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you're ever curious, it's because our CFO actually provided CFO services for the Funeral Services Commission. She stood them up. So
I just thought we were expanding our options to our stakeholders, and we're going to be licensed funeral directors now as well. But
not at all.
okay, I'm glad I misunderstood that.
Okay, anything else related to the report from the board administrator or other staff? Okay.
That concludes my report.
Okay. Then we will move on to agenda item 4D, reports from the committees. And so up first is is Dr. Elder with the Ethics Committee.
Okay, so the Ethics Committee met on September 30th. We held 4 informal settlement conferences. 3 resulted in offers of agreed orders. 1 resulted in a revocation. I'm not sure that that eventually ended up in an agreed order of revocation, but that is what we recommended at the time. December 17th, we held 2 more ISEs that resulted in 1 dismissal, 1 agreed order, offer of an agreed order. And then we met again January 9th, and we reviewed 6 cases that had already made it through the adjudication process. So we're basically looking at the agreed orders or the decisions that were made. And we concurred with 5 of the findings out of the 6. And then we asked to review the full case file so that we could have a better understanding of the context in which that decision was made, so that we could understand more about it. That's all.
Okay. Any questions for Dr. Elder? Okay. Then the next is a report from the Licensing Standards Committee, and that would be me. So this quarter, I approved 3 study plans. So again, for anybody who's listening, if somebody has taken the licensing exam more than 3 times, they have to complete a study plan before we approve them to take it the 4th time. And so I approved 3 study plans. We also heard 3 cases. The first case was an LMFT that was grandfathered without. Should I give details, or should I just say we heard cases?
Yeah, generally best not to air individual cases unless
Never mind.
necessary.
We heard 3 cases. 2 were resolved. A 3rd we're actually going to meet probably after this meeting to have a conversation about. So anyway, so 3 cases. Okay, next is any questions about that? Okay. Agenda item, or the next item is a report from the Outreach Committee Chair. That would also be me. So at the BHEC meeting in, I think, October-ish, BHEC reviewed the mental health professions guidance that we had sent up to BHEC, and they declined to put it on their website, which is fine. We are not hurt over that or anything. It's just, it is what it is. Their arguments against it made complete sense. So anyway, so they did not approve our mental health professions guidance. We are currently working on supervision guidance for our website. And hopefully we will have that ready to be reviewed before the April board meeting. We are also going to be reviewing and updating the social media and telehealth guidance on the website just to make sure that it is still up to date and accurate and says what we want it to say. So hopefully we'll also review that and have some updates for that in April as well. So then next, any questions? Okay, then we are going to move on to report from the Professional Development Committee Chair, which would be Dr. Barty.
Yes, we met in October on the 18th, and there were 2 big things that we were looking at. One were the upcoming rule changes and what kind of changes might need to be made to the jurisprudence exam. That was done in November. The changes with the new rules that came in, those modifications were sent to the vendor, and they were completed by the end of the month. So we're current with our jurisprudence exam with the new rules as of the November rules. The other big thing had to do with CEs. We love CEs, and we decided that we were going to ask a whole lot of people for help in this one. Not only, with the ideas of what are the required CEs, what are the, how many CEs and things. We didn't change the number of CEs expectations, but there was great discussion on which CEs might need to be required. And from that came, well, what are other states doing? What are their what are their approaches? What topics do they focus in on? Ethics for sure is one that's fairly universal, but some of the other CE requirements that we have in Texas, some states don't have, and there are some requirements that other states have that we don't. There are even a few states that did not have CE requirements for their license renewals periods. So because of that was very convoluted, we decided that we would survey our stakeholders, that we would put together a document and just ask our licensees, what do you think? What are your thoughts about which CEs, how many hours do you think would be reasonable? And that is an item that's going to be discussed here a little bit later. I think it's item 12 that we will be looking at with that. So that's just a little bit of a precursor of what that is that we are going to be trying to address the CE topics and hours in this quarter, if we can. And that's where we are.
I did have a question about one of the questions on the jurisprudence exam. It was question 20507. The STEM says that you have to wait at least 3 years. And then the answer appears to be true because it's bolded, but you don't have to wait 3 years to get, you don't have to be under supervision for 3 years. It's only 2. So I wasn't sure if I was misreading the question wrong or if the answer was wrong.
Can you tell me the name of the number of the question again?
20507.
Dr. Merchant, my understanding of that question is that for an LMFT associate, it's 2 years minimum.
Right.
But once you're a fully licensed LMFT, you can't apply to become an LMFT supervisor unless you've been practicing
For 3 years.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I just didn't read the question
Yeah,
well enough.
I
Okay.
think that's my
Thank you.
understanding of it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Yep. We're good. Never mind. Okay. Any other questions or comments about the professional development committee report?
It is so much work to make sure that every single question reflects the current rules, and the rules change often. So thank you. I assume that's you, Ms. Fazholt.
Yes.
Thank you for
Mhm.
staying on top of that so meticulously.
Okay. Then we will move on to the report from the Rules Committee Chair. We met twice to review public comment from the 4-year rule review. And then again to discuss the proposed rule related to CEs that we're going to discuss later in the meeting. So any questions at this juncture? Okay. Then let's move on to matters for potential board action. So up 5 is discussion and possible action to re-elect or replace Dr. Elder as our vice chair. I would like to nominate Jody Elder to continue to be our vice chair. Is there any discussion?
Second it.
No discussion.
So that was Ms. Richardson. She seconded. So all those in favor of re-electing Dr. Elder as our vice chair, raise your hand. Okay, that is unanimous, and so that passes. Next is discussion and possible action to delegate a professional member to the Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council. I would actually like to nominate myself for that. There are some items that BHEC is taking up, like supervision, and I just really want to be a part of those conversations, and hopefully they will be happening over the next year. So I would like to nominate myself. Is there any discussion?
I will make a motion. Can I make a motion that we
Please.
nominate you? Because it sounds kind of weird that you would nominate
I
yourself.
know. I didn't know how to do that.
So
hopefully
I
one of y'all would
will
jump in.
do that. I would like to nominate that Dr.
Second.
Merchant, you do that.
Second.
Thank you,
Jody.
Dr. Barty.
Second.
Thank you, Jody.
All right.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay. Okay, that was unanimous. Okay, next we need to replace the public member delegate to the BHEC Council. I wish Mr. Parrish was here because, to be honest, I have no idea if he wants to be replaced or not. So I guess I was going to ask Mr. Parrish if he wanted to be replaced or if he was happy to continue serving. Is there any of our other public members that would like to serve?
He's not interesting. I'd be interested. He's interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. He's not here. What do we do?
So if the next time the council meets is February 18th.
Uh-huh.
So this is your chance to have a delegate at that meeting.
Right.
If you choose to have a delegate at that meeting, unless Mr. Parrish is continuing. So if you risk not having one of your votes
Right.
at the council meeting on the February 18th if you don't elect someone today or are able to confirm.
I don't know. Do you think I could call him? Can I call him in the middle of a meeting? I don't know.
Can we do that? What do our illustrious attorneys say?
Could we assume that Mr. Parrish will, and if not, that as a backup?
Well, the only other complication that Patrick pointed out is that Mr. Parrish's term on the board is also up this month.
Mm.
And
I don't know if he's
There-
being reappointed.
we don't know yet who, if any, is being reappointed. And while his term would technically continue until the end of session, if he doesn't get reappointed, then you'd have to have another election.
Well-
It might be a little complicated.
Well, the other thing is Mr. Parrish is like incredibly easygoing. Like he is like, I don't think if we elected Mr. Hampton, I don't think that Mr. Parrish is going to like,
Agreed.
he is not going to be hurt.
Agreed.
I make a motion that we, I make a motion that we elect as our public member delegate to the BHEC to be Mr. Hampton.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. You're not, okay, I was going to say. That was unanimous. So, yeah, that is he is now so appointed. Okay, licensing matters. I don't believe we have any licensing matters to discuss. Is that correct?
That's correct.
We don't. The only thing I would add, license, because it is technically licensing related, I need to correct myself from an earlier.
Okay.
I got an email, the temporary MFT license is not issued a unique license number. Therefore, it does not show up in the database. So we can confirm if somebody
Contact
reaches
you
out to
directly.
us to verify. But if they were just doing the online search, they wouldn't see that license.
Thank you.
And there are 4 of them so far.
4. Yay. Okay. Number 9, agenda item number 9, examination matters. Anything here that we need to discuss? Okay, I don't think so. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
This is Jody, Dr. Elder. Okay, so Ms. Fassel, you had inquired about just the small number of public or feedback and comments on the last quarter of JP exams. What response might you have gotten?
The vendor replied that she ran the same report that I'm able to run through their interface and received no errors and also had just those few comments. She had her data team look through their records in more detail and found no anomalies. So as far as we can tell, that those few number of comments, while completely unusual, is what we got.
Well, thank you for following up on that.
I'll be keeping an eye on it for the next quarter and ask them to, if we still get as few a number, then I'll ask them to tickle their files again.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 10, enforcement matters. So 10A is board review and possible action regarding SOA cases. We have one case to discuss and vote on, and that is for Kyle Sessoms. What is the best way to tackle this conversation?
Do you want me to give just a brief summary and then we can
Please.
see if he's here and have an opportunity to speak?
Yes.
So this matter arose from he had a previous agreed order that was entered into that suspended his license. Staff received a complaint that he was potentially practicing while on a suspended license. So an emergency temporary suspension hearing was held, and it continued the suspension of his license. And then it was done, and that was held with board members Parrish and Smith. So they would need to recuse from this, but they're not here today, so that's an easy recusal for them. It was then docketed at SOA. There was a hearing to to continue the suspension and then finally a full contested case hearing. You have in your packet what's called a PFD, a proposal for decision from the administrative law judge that did make a finding that he had violated the order and had been practicing marriage and family therapy with a suspended license, as well as other potential other violations that they found. And so the recommendation from the SOA ALJ is that his license be revoked. And so that's now brought back to the board for the board to review the proposal for decision and to either accept or modify it. And then that recommendation from this board would go to the council at its meeting in February, and then the council would enter the final order. So what was added to the packet was a one-page order that it adopts the proposal for decision, revoking his license. Staff is not recommending any changes to the proposal for decision. But of course, if you have any questions about it, I'd be happy to answer them. And then I think he's in attendance. And so our notice to him, let him know that he would be given an opportunity to address the board.
So if
Okay.
you have no questions of Attorney Patrick, I will ask Mr. Sessoms if he'd like to.
Please.
Mr. Sessoms, would you like to speak to the board?
Yes, ma'am. To everyone present, thank you for allowing me your time and attention, and I sincerely ask for your solidarity and attention while I make use of my time, and I'll try to do everything in my power to keep it within that time, that 10 minutes, especially given that this situation literally impacts not only the rest of my own life, but also that of my 3-year-old son and wife. It's my understanding that you've been presented with full documentation and recommendations, and I understand that no new evidence on either side will be presented, and I will adhere to that. And so everything in my statement has already been previously in my communications with the disciplinary board and in my SOA hearings. Without question, these past couple of years have been the hardest of my life. I've been consumed with depression and self-hatred. The immense amount of guilt, shame, and embarrassment have been nothing but palpable. There have been several instances in which I felt like the only way to escape my life was to be in the most severe and permanent manner. Simply being here today is a genuine success that very few understand the magnitude of. Having been a fallen from great spectacle, both in personal relationships and in the public eye, has been excruciating. I'm fully aware and I understand that many of my personal poor decisions led to those things happening, and I will never intend to excuse myself from accountability on appropriately placed situations. With that, please allow me a moment to reflect back how I got into this situation, and I'll keep the names private. Almost 3 years ago, I had a client of the abbreviations HM, and to keep it short, we grew close through a therapeutic relationship, and then we both crossed the line for the last few months of that relationship, knowing each other by flirting primarily through Snapchat. And I knew I shouldn't have accepted that request to be her friend, but I made that mistake and I did. Around that time, my wife and I lost one of our twin babies just before birth. As profoundly as excited as I was to have a boy, I felt the equal sting of loss of our little girl. I became depressed and distant from my wife and God, and even angry. My life began to crumble, and so I reached out to something that was showing me attention, and that was my client, HM. And during this time period, she began proposing me sexual exchanges, such as showing me pictures of herself in lingerie and quite literally trying to prostitute herself to me, of which I never obliged to any of those things. She did proposition me again for how much I would pay to watch her be intimate with her own self, and I didn't oblige, but I did make a comment that I would pleasure myself to that later. Later that evening, she asked if I had yet, and I told her no, and she sent the video of herself being intimate with her boyfriend and asked me that I send a similar video of myself in return. I found a video online purporting it as me, of a 6-second video clip, and sent it to her. She told me that She was trying to get me to cross the line professionally and with my wife, and I ended and terminated her as a client and friend. And then she reported me to the board for sending sexually explicit material, which I did in fact do. I'm embarrassed and I'm ashamed, and I never should have entertained any of that. I have and will continue to be legitimately haunted by that decision. After HM had 2 different failed attempts at a civil suit and 1 failed attempt at a criminal charges that were all not pursued or dismissed, she decided to pursue further damages by going to WFAA News in Dallas, to which they created a news story about me. The very public and permanent shaming was exquisitely painful, and it still is. During this time of suspension, I began offering life coaching instead of therapy. I knew that I was not to attempt at offering counseling or therapy services. On the BHEC website FAQ section, specifically for MFTs, it stated one simple phrase which read that there is nothing in the rules that prohibit life coaching services. Later, after an inquiry from my attorney, it was changed in adding more sentences, but to those reasons, I'm unaware, as we never received an answer as to why. I also had read the Texas Administrative Code Rule 882.23 and 24 of the Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council's section and understood it as stating nothing of life coaching, and the activities or services of life coaching were exempt from the council's jurisdiction. I was particularly careful that when something approached therapy intervention, I stated that the specific topic would be good for a therapist or counselor to help with, because I was focused on things like goal setting. My understanding and connection between the 2 items previously stated that gave me the confidence to offer coaching services strictly. Daryl Spinks and others, potentially those listening or attending here today, also said in recorded meetings that were presented in SOA that the licensing board does not have any jurisdiction whatsoever over life coaching. How could a licensing board claim jurisdiction or control over a field of work or service if there is no jurisdiction, definition, or prohibition of that specific work? If we're being honest, this is a genuine discrepancy and contradiction. Only later at the time of my hearing did I actually become alerted that I wasn't allowed to provide coaching services, or so I was told, and I was mortified and frankly both scared and confused that I may have done something truly unintentional in not being in compliance with the disciplinary order. During this time period of suspension, I was given counsel by my attorney that what I had previously stated, that I should be in accordance with the disciplinary action. Whenever their topic was approached that we needed therapy, I encouraged them to find a respective therapist and to process what they needed to, because again, I was specifically for goal setting. During this time, I met with a client by the abbreviations of MR. I met with her and her husband for coaching appointments to goal set for what they needed and wanted, such as date nights and things of the such. And then she later terminated with me because she had found that my license had been revoked or suspended. And she even stated to me that she knew that I had told her verbally and what was in the paperwork that it was coaching services, but she didn't feel comfortable after learning my license was suspended. She also later said that she quote unquote felt like there was therapy at 1 or 2 instances, but I would state that that is not proof or evidence that there actually was. She did later request a refund, and I manually refunded all of her money to her. Why she waited 7 months later after terminating, I do not know, to file a complaint. During the time of my very deserved suspension, I generally went to great lengths at locating and removing anything online that described me or my services as a licensed therapist or providing therapy. I completely acknowledge that there were at times very, very unintentional errors or misses on my part. And when I became alerted to anything that I hadn't seen, I immediately went to work at removing those credentials or statements. And after 10 years of being a therapist, that took time. I presented the judge with over 30 specific items that I had worked at removing from online of my credentials. Lastly, when my disciplinary order directed me to find a counselor for my own self, I was repeatedly denied by almost over a dozen LMFT therapists because they did not want to be involved with my disciplinary action. With the burden of time, I began my own therapy. My attorney alerted the compliance department that I was in fact having a difficult time finding someone to work with me. Finally, JD McDonald, an LPC, accepted me as a client as a last-ditch effort. My attorney alerted the compliance department and the one overseeing my specific case and gave them Mr. McDonald's LPC credentials. for both appraisal and for approval. Never once did we get notified or cautioned that he was not to be accepted as my therapist, and so I continued to meet with him biweekly according to my disciplinary order. Since the administrative hearing, when I'm not allowed to provide life coaching services, I've transitioned into being a roofing sales position. Every day that I wake up and literally I go door to door selling roofs, I am presented with the shame of my poor choices from the past. Going from a highly esteemed, educated therapist that was incredibly respected and sought after to a door-to-door salesman in the same community is humiliating and more difficult than I can describe. I should have never put myself into that position that I did with HM years ago, and I absolutely should have been more self-informed on what I was able to do and not to do in providing coaching services despite the discrepancies. As I end my short time with you, please understand that I do take full responsibility and ownership of my actions. In my attempt to give context for why I'm here in a short timeline, I please ask that you do know that I genuinely feel terrible for my own decisions. I truly was in the understanding that I was able to provide life coaching services as it isn't regulated in Texas or any other state. My consent forms and verbal communications were consistent with that, and that I would not be working as a therapist in any way, shape, or form or in that capacity. I genuinely feel profoundly sad for anyone that I unintentionally hurt or felt confused by that. I am very grateful for your time. I would ask to be allowed into having my story as a counselor be a redemptive one as I refine my faith. I would ask for compassion, grace, and understanding. And in my own mind and heart, I would absolutely ask for a new disciplinary action or to recomplete the one that was previously given. My heart at its very core is a therapist, not a door-to-door salesman. It has and was been one of the best honors of my life in literally helping thousands of people. I want to be able to help people learn that they can recover from the lowest depths of depression and bad decisions because I'm a living example of it, helping others while under the jurisdiction and overwatch of the board. If not at this very time, but at a later time after continuing disciplinary action, I would ask to be reinstated. What I've done will be for others to see for the rest of my life, but I am working at repairing my own self-worth and believing that I can be a better person and also valuable. I would like to be valuable as a therapist and repair my wrongdoings as well. Thank you for your deep consideration and for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sessom. Board members, do you have any questions of Mr. Sessom?
Thank you, sir, for attending. We'll remove you from the panel, but please don't go anywhere as the board discusses.
Is there any discussion?
I've got a question of clarification, the timing and the sequencing of this. There was a suspension of the license, and during the suspension of the license, he needed to have an element, be under LMFT supervision for 1 year. Is that correct?
He was supposed to have therapy. It wasn't supervision. He was supposed to actually be getting therapy during that suspension period of time.
Okay, so during that, and it was stated that it needed to be an LMFT providing the therapy.
In the order, yes.
Okay, and that Mr. Sessom's mentioned that he had difficulty finding an LMFT therapist that would provide that therapy, and so he then went to an LPC therapist whose license expired.
Correct. If you look at page 20 of the PFD, the proposal for decision, under number 7, the finding of fact, it says from March 8th, 2023 to April 3rd, 2024, respondent did not participate in any therapy with an LMFT. And then from April 25th, 2024, respondent had seen an LMFT 3 times from the date of the agreed order on the hearing on the merits. In 2024, he saw an LMFT 3 times. Was it Brian? Was it an LMFT? Is that correct? I thought it was an LPC.
Yes. Yeah, it was an LMFT.
Okay.
He didn't see them until after the hearing.
He saw the LMFT after the hearing that we had. Okay. But he had seen an LPC a few times, but not during that period of time that
Right.
specified in the order, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So that would constitute a violation of that order.
That part of it, correct.
Okay, good.
There's also, the ALJ also found that there's also, I guess I'd draw your attention to page 16. In the middle paragraph, it says, the preponderance of the credible evidence establishes that respondent engaged in the practice of marriage and family therapy while his therapist license was suspended, thereby violating the agreed order. It's also reflected in the findings of fact and conclusions of law. Back on page 20, where number 9, it says during one or more of MR sessions with respondent, he engaged in the practice of marriage and family therapy in violation of the agreed order. And also in finding of fact 11, it says respondent's website and LinkedIn profile referred to respondent as a licensed MFT, a licensed marriage and family therapist, even after months after his license had been suspended. So there was an advertising as well issue. So there's 3 different things I believe the ALJ focused on. Well, is there anything else, any other violations? I think that's it, right, Brian?
Yeah, the only other thing was that he didn't inform his coaching clients that his status was suspended.
Ah, okay.
I thought there was also a question about cooperating when he was asked for information, that there was a delay or an obfuscation of some kind. Like he was asked to produce evidence or documents and then he didn't. Was that right?
I believe there are allegations of that, but I don't know that the ALJ made a finding that that was actually a violation. Is that
I
correct,
see.
Brian?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. So that there's not a finding that was
Okay.
a violation of that.
Thank you.
Any further discussions or questions?
For the board members' consideration, I see, what I'm not seeing in the order is there any provision for when staff may accept an application for reinstatement?
Yeah, the proposal for decision doesn't address that, and it's difficult for us to go ahead and put in an order. I think at this time, I don't know that we've not had any cases that have gone to the State Office of Administrative Hearings and gone through a PFD, and then in the order put specifics as to when they could come back or how they can come back. There is in our rules, it specifically bars him from reapplying for 1 year. He can reapply and then for reinstatement of his license. And then at that time, the board can consider the reinstatement application and say, we're going to approve, deny, or approve with certain conditions, or speak to what the board would want to see, in order to reinstate a license, such as what rehabilitative efforts would he need to undertake. I've never had an order that we've put those in to say, here's what you need to do to get a license back. But I mean, obviously it's something that could be discussed.
Can we put a time limit on when he can reapply? Or because it's in rule, can we not, like if,
I don't know that.
Yeah, that would be, the problem is that would be adding an additional punitive thing that a judge did not have.
okay,
We would probably advise against it.
yes, okay.
This is Dr. Elder. So my understanding is in the future, let's say that year occurs
Mhm.
and then he reapplies. The licensing standard committee who would review that application, it would immediately be sent for review. And then that committee would have access to the same case files we have to consider how to move forward. Is that right?
Honestly, by tradition, usually we as staff would likely deny it, and they would appeal to the full board.
Okay.
They would come in those sorts of cases. Generally we bring it before the full board rather than committee, because the full board took the action to revoke the license. So we let the full board decide.
There is an avenue for reconsideration later, and the board would have a chance to look at, whoever's on the board at that time would have a chance to review that evidence as part of their decision-making process.
Right.
Could you bring it to the committee first, just so that the committee could maybe create a plan to present to the board?
It could also come to the board and the board could send it back to a committee or,
Okay.
I mean, there's several different ways to do it.
Okay. Okay. Any other further questions or discussion? Okay, then do I need a motion?
Just, just to point out, y'all are not required. Mr. Sessoms does have his hand up.
Oh,
Um,
yes, we can. Are y'all happy to hear from him again? I'm happy to hear from him again. That's fine.
Mr. Sessoms?
Yes, thank you for allowing me just one more moment. I really do appreciate it because I know this is serious and I know that you guys are taking it serious and so am I. So I do appreciate it. For clarity, yes, I did meet with JD McDonald after an immense amount of difficulty and alerting the compliance board, finding someone and alerting the compliance department. When I scheduled with JD, he was fully licensed as an LPC, and I met with him bi-weekly for several months. I did not learn of his license expiration until just before the SOA hearing, and he himself never informed me. And so I continued to meet with him while he had a suspended license, but I genuinely did not know during this entire time. And again, I never heard from the compliance department that he wasn't accepted or we needed to change. And so at the very end of that all, or at the end of it, when I found that out, I terminated with him. And then I was successfully able to find a long distance MFT license holder here in the state to finally meet with me. And so that's the individual that I met with for that less than a handful of times before the hearing. So JD was fully licensed as an LPC when I scheduled with him, and he was for several months. And then at some point, unbeknownst to me, he let that expire and he never told me. And so I just want to make that, I just want to make that clear on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion?
No, well, just an observation, a comment. Since Mr. Sessoms was required to do therapy and not have supervision as a remediation dynamic, which would require reporting, compliance and assessments and things like that would go with that. It's curious to me that a therapist who's being approached to provide therapy for someone that might have this type of a personal issue was so difficult to find.
I think that, and I could misunderstand it, I think that part of the issue is that whoever he chose was expected to report to the board and give some sort of like quarterly, hey, he's showing up and these are the things that he's working on. Do I misunderstand
Is
that?
That's probably the case. I don't have his agreed order in front of me, but that's typical language we would put in an agreed order that would say if you're either getting supervision or therapy, we want a thumbs up from the person providing therapy or supervision, or if there's some sort of issues, we want that supervisor or therapist to let us know so that we can then address those issues and whatever the issue might be with the particular licensee, so that going forward, they're not continuing to have the same problems whenever they're providing services to the public.
That still boggles my mind.
Yeah.
Why a grounded LMFT therapist would not take someone on as a client, even if you have to give. I mean, we do work, return to work verifications. Someone comes in and they're mandated to come in that their work says, hey, I'm going to lose my job unless I get counseling. No, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I got to report to somebody. Well, we don't, that doesn't happen.
Most agencies require monthly or quarterly reports.
Yeah. And it's just, if we're doing this, this is something that I think needs to be out to clinicians, is don't be so skittish about this. If it really was this difficult, then that's a shame that it was that difficult.
Agreed.
That's just okay.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Any further questions or discussion?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dr. Barty.
I'm on a roll.
Yeah, that's fine.
This brings back again I believe a topic that we would need to continue to clarify, the licensed therapist versus life coaching distinction. Because if I understood Mr. Sessoms correctly, he was saying that the life coaching that he could step into is not as regulated with all that. And I just don't know if we need to continue to find ways to clarify the language so that there's not that type of confusion, that there is a firewall between what we do as licensed professionals and which is regulated, and life coaching, which is not regulated, as an industry.
All right.
So I'm going to hush up because I know that's a thing.
Well, I think we're going to touch on this later, but do y'all want to say anything at this juncture?
I'd rather
Yes.
save it for later for the
Okay.
11C proposal for rule change.
Okay, let's do that. But thank you, Russ. Thank you,
Ah.
Dr. Ortiz. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, is there a motion to accept the PDF or PFD?
I make a motion. This is Dr. Elder.
Okay, do I have a second?
Nicole Richardson seconds it.
All those in favor of accepting the PFD? Okay, any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay. Okay, next is, where are we on my agenda here?
10B.
10B, board review and possible action regarding agreed orders to be executed by the board.
Mr. Chair, just to tell Mr. Sessoms, thank you for appearing. I'm sure our staff will follow up with you with next steps, and regarding your rights of appeal, et cetera.
Well, it'll go to the council on February 18th. And so the council will also, he has a right to appear and address the council as well. And they will review the same information and the recommendation from this board, and then they will enter a final order in this matter. So, and then after that order is entered, that something will be mailed to him as well, the final order.
Okay, thank you. Okay, 10B, board review and possible action regarding agreed orders. Any discussion here?
There are no orders for the board to execute.
Fantastic, okay. Then let's move on to agenda item number 11.
Wait,
rule-
can I ask a question? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yes, ma'am.
It's not really listed as an agenda item, but it was provided to us in the board packet. It's the list of dismissed cases.
Okay,
And still under 10, under enforcement. I had a question. So I understand where it says corrective action taken, basically meaning the licensee fixed it. And so the complaint wasn't pursued. I'm curious, what does remedial plan mean? And how is that different than corrective action taken?
My guess is that might be a typo. It should have maybe been corrective action taken. Sometimes they have a drop-down box that they select. Psychology has specifically a remedial plan by statute, and so I don't know specifically for that particular case, but my guess is that maybe when they selected it, they actually did the psychology one, because there are something called remedial plans that, because by statute we can do those for psychologists. That's an option. I'm only assuming that maybe that was a oops, and they meant it should have been a corrective action taken.
Okay, they sounded very similar, so I was curious.
Yeah.
Okay. And then a follow-up question. we got it in 4BC3. It's the 2024 end of year report about, I'm trying to think, but anyway, it's got lots of beautiful bar charts and
Mhm,
graphs. It's so nice. And I put it in all my ethics presentations. I did want to ask, so there is a chart. It's the blue and orange one, and it says there were 485 complaints resolved in this fiscal year. And 16% of those resulted in a disciplinary action and 84% were dismissed. And I would just like to have a discussion about those numbers and how we have those percentages.
I guess basically, 16% seems low. And so like, I guess, can you just tell us a little bit about maybe why a case would be dismissed? I guess I just want to make sure that we're not prioritizing efficiency, I don't know, over protection. So I guess it just seems like a lot.
Sure. I mean, I can speak to when we started doing charts like this at Psychology Board. I believe, and Daryl can correct me if I get this wrong, but I believe our sanction rate was actually at like 10%. And so this is actually much higher than that. I was actually surprised that this is actually a higher percentage. So not to skirt this question, but just to go back quickly to your previous question, the Excel that you're looking at, there's multiple tabs, and I think that was the psychology tab that you're looking at. So there's actually an MFT. There's 4 tabs. Was it an Excel spreadsheet? It looked like that. Oh yeah, it comes from an Excel though.
Oh, I didn't
And
get
so
the Excel version.
There's
Okay.
4 tabs for each of the boards.
Oh,
And
I
so
see.
that might be the psychology one. That's probably why it said
Oh, so we got the
remedial
wrong
plan.
report because it says school psychology on one of them.
No, I've provided you the Excel spreadsheet.
I think you only printed out.
Now it's clicking in my brain. Now
I
it's
think you only
clicking in my
printed out
brain.
the-
Talk about that.
Yeah. But to go back to your other question, I actually thought that was a high number. So that's just my perspective. Is I thought we actually are sanctioning people more than we used to at psychology, and I viewed it. This is again my perspective. Is that's actually we try to as staff weigh regulating fairly, but also protecting the public. And so if it's something that we truly need to go after, that's something we're going to discipline somebody for. But if it's really not, if it's like, for example, corrective action taken, somebody had a misstatement for their advertising and it was correct everywhere else, but they goofed, some for whatever reason, and they didn't accurately do that. We alert them to it and they immediately fix it, right? That's something where we'd say, okay, is it technically a violation? Could we go after them and sanction them? We could, but is that something where corrective action was taken? All the other things they were advertising were correct, and this was obviously just a mistake, a typo mistake. That would be something we would say, okay, we're going to dismiss it, give them a warning letter, or just tell them you took corrective action. Thank you for doing that. Please be mindful of how you advertise in the future. And that to me is the more fair way to treat the licensee. So the other problem too that we get with dismissals is we get some complaints that come in and we look at them and go, you're upset, but you haven't identified actually a violation. There's not anything that they've done that was wrong, that violated a rule. And so while you may be upset or frustrated about something, there's no cause here. And so those are, I think, what we see, or at least what I've just anecdotally seen, like a big reason for the larger number of dismissals that go into it. Another part of it too is while we may think sometimes there might be a violation, we don't have sufficient evidence to prove that there is a violation. And so, we have a standard of evidence that we have to, abide by when we take cases to SOA. And so there's only so much we can do. We can't always track down witnesses, or witnesses are reluctant to talk to us or participate. So those all go into the dismissal side of things. So
that's a really good explanation. But I think for the data to be meaningful, that would need to be captured. So of your dismissals, what % are administrative? What % are due to lack of evidence? What % are due to maybe a customer service violation, but not really a rule violation, a customer service frustration, but not necessarily a rule violation? I think that would help put some context around that data. Now, that may be too much work, obviously, but that would help put some context.
I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think we've been talking internally about trying to get some more helpful data like that. It's at the beginning stages, so I don't want to promise you anything because we don't have it there yet. But we've had some ideas about trying to take what we have and see if we can get more helpful information like that.
Another piece of information that might be helpful, particularly for the public as well to know, in our investigation process, obviously the first stage is for the investigators to go out and gather evidence and look, and they make a recommendation, and then it goes to the legal department to carry out and process. The investigators are significantly more likely to find a potential violation than these numbers reflect. So they are recommending dismissal more like a third of the cases, and 2/3 finding something to proceed with or look at or, pursue. And so, especially if you were worried, are we dismissing so many right out of hat? We're not. We are, a large number of those dismissals are after having fully worked it through the process, and ultimately we determine we can't prove the violation, can't go forward, whatever. So we are certainly dismissing a fair number right off of hat because they simply don't state something that's in our jurisdiction, or they don't cooperate with us as witness, things like that. But it's a much smaller number than that.
Right. So I think data will help. I don't think we're saying we need to get to 25, 30%.
Yeah,
We're not
exactly.
asking anybody to get to numbers. I hope we're not.
No.
Just more data to kind of substantiate what's been done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Daryl just corrected me, sent me a message that says 10% was the disciplinary rate across all boards before BHEC.
Oh, good. Good. Okay. Well, thank y'all very much for that's really everything y'all just said is incredibly helpful. So thank you. Okay. Moving on to agenda item 11, rulemaking. So 11A is discussion and possible action regarding the adoption of new rules. So basically all the rules listed under here, 1 through 8, those have all came out of our 4-year rule review. And most of the changes are either because the rule as written is unenforceable or in some way does not align with statute. And so we did receive a summary of comments. And so any discussion of the comments that we received or just any comments about any of these rules at this juncture?
I found it very interesting. In my naivete, I never thought about a clinician putting fake online reviews. That was one of the comments that we got, the public comments, is that you can go on and put all these fake online reviews, really raving about your services and blow yourself up. I guess my mind doesn't think like that, but it's an interesting idea that I think we need to kind of keep our eyes open to. And I don't know how we would regulate that. I don't think we can. I think that's non-jurisdictional, but it's something to consider.
Well, it would be if it was part of their professional practice and they were either posting the fake reviews themselves or getting other people to post fake reviews. That would be a misrepresentation that they are relying on as part of their professional service. That would be a violation of our rules, even with this change. The change that we are pulling is simply essentially the duty to go correct everybody else's misunderstandings. What would not get covered is if they have a profile on some general website of Psychology Today or one of these services, and other people, completely unbeknownst to them, go and put reviews that are wrong for whatever reason, either good or bad or otherwise just inaccurate. I think the position we're taking is our licensees shouldn't have a duty to go and comb through those comments that they never put up in the first place and have no idea about, to then offer some sort of comment and correction and get into a comment battle on social media of who's right and who's wrong. That's what we're getting away from. But certainly if there's any proof that someone is posting false information or getting someone else to post false information, that's a violation of our rules.
Hopefully that public commenter, Aaron Robb, will take some comfort in knowing that, because I learned something new too. So thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Any additional comments or questions about any of these rules at this juncture? So the last time we had a huge long set of rules to approve, we were able to take them as one big block. Can we take them as one big block again? Okay,
Absolutely.
good. Then is there anybody who would like to make a motion for us to accept these rules 1 through 8?
This is Barbara Ezel. I move that we accept the rules 1 through 8.
Are you going to second? Oh, maybe not.
I would love to second. I was waiting to see if anybody else wanted to, but yes, I would second.
Okay, that was Dr. Barty.
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the rules 1 through 8, raise your hand. Okay, that is unanimous. Okay, moving on to agenda item 11B, 11B rule related to continuing education. And I'm going to turn this over to Robert.
Thank you. So this rule is actually the continuing education rule that was discussed earlier about our survey, as well as in the public comments. To give you some context, first, Dr. Merchant, would you like me to share my screen so the text is?
That'd be great. Yes, thank you.
I'm getting it up if you like.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So the change here is addressing the comments we've received about the cultural diversity or competency language. To give you some background, this concept was first developed in the state health plan back in the 2011 to 2016 state health plan. And the concept at the time was that given the increasing growth of the population of Texas and the growth in desiring mental health care services, more and more diverse populations were going to be requesting services, and that both medical and mental health care providers needed to be competent to provide those services to all of those distinct populations. Now, the psychology board adopted this requirement back then, over a decade ago. And when the other three boards came on to BHEC, as part of the sort of standardization efforts, when they looked at the CE rule, this component was added to the CE requirement. And from its beginning, the council has always treated this as a requirement to be competent to provide services to whatever population you choose to serve. Despite the requirement for being competent, we have always held that no one is required to provide services when they don't feel adequate to do so. That is a right that licensees have. They don't give it up at the door, that they must treat things that they don't feel competent to treat. And so we've really assumed and let licensed providers decide which subpopulation, which distinct group are they going to get training in to become competent. Well, despite that intention, we have had many questions over the last year, some at your board meetings, at other board meetings, like the commenting today, that seems to misunderstand, but have a genuine belief that the requirement is requiring people to get training in a particular population or a particular philosophy. It does not. It never has. But this has become a distraction from what the rule is actually trying to do. And so staff's recommendation is to make this change to the language to clarify and just align with what we have always said it is, which is, to quote this language, you need 3 hours of education designed to ensure competency when providing services to a distinct population, and that's defined as a group of people who share a common attribute, trait, or defining characteristic of the licensee's choice. And again, while the staff's recommendation is that we add this language, we change it to clarify and make sure it's crystal clear what this requirement is and is not, to further bolster what I think the board has expressed, which is a continuing belief that licensees need to be competent not only in the practices that they are providing, the services themselves, the cognitive behavioral therapy, the play therapy, the other things, but also competent to serve the populations they are giving those services to. So that is what's motivating bringing this and why we're asking for your approval.
I will just add that, I mean, like, I've even had people reach out to me and say, well, I want to work with, I want to do a training on military families. You know, would that count? And it's, yes, it counts. It's always counted. Or somebody will say, I want to attend a training on, you know, families with a child with autism. Would that count? Yes, that counts. And so, I mean, I feel like the rule has always been pretty broad, but there is something about the language that just contributes to confusion or people viewing it very narrowly. And so I am in support of making this change. I also want to say that, like, I know that graduate education, it does lots of wonderful things for us, but our graduate education is not the end all be all of our education. Like, you cannot learn every single thing that you need to know about every population that you will one day work with in your graduate education. My graduate education, we learned mostly theory. I remember we read an entire book on working with men in therapy. And then it wasn't until 15 years later that I actually started really, like, working with men in therapy. And I had to go get CEs on how to work with men in therapy. It was my first time in my life. I'd also been working predominantly with men who were either Hispanic or African American. And so again, I had to get CEs because yes, I'd had that back at my graduate training 15 years ago, but like things change, you know? And so your graduate education is not going to teach you every single thing you need to know about every population that you're going to work with. And so to me, it's really important that we do have a CE like this so that people can get training in whatever groups or populations they do work with.
So what would that look like for let's say a new practitioner? Because I don't know. So we have certain standards in education because that's my background. So how do they choose the area? Do they get to choose that area and it's any 3 hours or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I was just curious.
yeah, so they can choose military families, families with a child with autism, postpartum women. I mean, like they can choose any kind of
OCD.
Okay.
Anxiety disorders.
any kind of distinct group
Farmers
or
and
population
ranchers.
that they want that they choose.
Farmers and ranchers. That's a good one.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Rural communities, LGBTQ community, like anything, whatever kind of, again, whatever population you're working with.
Okay. Thank you.
And could you address changing the language, but not changing hours? Like 3 hours.
Well, I'd be okay bumping it up to 6, but.
But I want to hear the rationale
Okay.
because I know the rationale, but I want to hear it.
Well, the rationale from staff is that this was the number of hours that you as the board had set. The psychology board does have 6 hours as a requirement. They have 40 hours rather than 30 hours required. And so I think part of the rationale for having less hours specified is always giving the licensees more flexibility for the rest of the hours. But it's the board's prerogative of how many hours total and how many of those are specified.
And yes, and I'm in support of that, and I endorse that. And it's also important to understand that it's not 3 hours in one topic only. This could be 3 1-hour topics. This could be 6 30-minute topics. I'll stop.
How many 15-minute sessions would that be? Anyways.
And I will say to the question of what this would look like, the council has signed an agreement with CE Broker, and this summer we are hoping to have live come on a way for people to report, and we would expect to, when we audit someone, to look at the title of the course and be able to understand, or the certificate, and see what is the population. I will say to the audience listening, I know I think there was a Facebook post maybe of someone suggesting, well, maybe they could have a group that was about dog therapy. And I don't think that's a population. I'm willing to have a conversation with you, but I don't think that's a population of the people getting the therapy. So I do think it needs to be people, a group of
I mean, you
people.
could get training in animal assisted therapy, but that would,
Yes, but that's
that would not
more,
call it, that would be something
that is a
different.
type of therapy,
Yes,
not the population getting
exactly.
served.
Yeah, that's working with humans who are doing that, not with
Yeah.
animals.
This is Elvira Reyna, and I just wanted to comment that the 3 hours are required, but that doesn't mean you can't take more than 3 hours if needed.
Of
Yeah,
course.
it's true. Very true.
I just want to echo and reiterate everything that's been said. I like that the language change really clarifies what it's always been, which is extremely broad. And I think I would like to emphasize, as we've discussed, that there's so much licensee autonomy built into the 3 hours. You get to choose the topic. You get to choose how many hours on each topic. And it's only 3, it's not 6, meaning we're leaving as many of the other hours open to licensee discretion as we can. And so I really support keeping it, and I like the new language.
Any further discussion? Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, we accept it as presented.
Do I have a second? Okay, that's Elvira who seconded. Okay, all those, any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, that would be unanimous. Okay, moving then on to agenda item 11C, discussion of possible action concerning petition for rulemaking by Laurel Clement. Okay, I guess how do we want to handle this conversation?
Yeah, so let me lay out the procedural situation, and then Ms. Clement is here, and I would imagine give her a few minutes to explain her petition. I will say upfront, staff is recommending denial of the petition, but because we have a different approach, not because the topic isn't worthy of pursuing. So under the APA, a person may petition the board to initiate rulemaking proceedings. The board must either take action or deny it. We can't just leave it pending. And so this Ms. Clement's petition is highlighting that issue of life coaching that we talked about earlier and how it's addressed in the rules. And the approach in the petition would be to remove it from being considered within the scope of MFT practice so that anyone, I won't speak for her, but I think the effect would be that anyone wishing to provide life coaching services can do so, and whether or not they are licensed, it is entirely outside of the scope of their license. Staff has a proposal that will be going before the council as a council rule that I think will address this issue in a different manner, which is to say, if something like life coaching or any other practice could both be under your license or not under your license for any of these licenses, we give you an avenue to essentially disclaim your license and say, hey, yes, I know I could be providing life coaching under my license, but I'm not. I'm taking off my license hat. I'm providing life coaching or yoga or art therapy or whatever it is under my First Amendment rights as a person to do this without any license at all. And we outline steps for you to how to do that so that you're not under the jurisdiction of your license. So that's all I'll say at the moment. It's the board's prerogative which direction to go. I will bring Ms. Clement onto the panel. Good afternoon, Ms. Clement. I sort of presumed that you would want to speak. You're not obligated to.
Well, sure. Thank you for letting me speak. I didn't see my petition in the documents. Perhaps I missed it. Would you double check, please?
Certainly, it is in the board's packet, but I don't know that it was on the public-facing side. So the board definitely has it.
Okay, well, okay. Thank you for that information. So I'm not really sure what would be different in what you, I mean, I appreciate you evaluating the situation and giving a duplicate or a different avenue, but I'm not really sure what would be different because you're either practicing with your license or you're not practicing with your license. And there's no jurisdiction in the whole country besides MFT board that thinks they license or have any jurisdiction over life coaching. And so it is, I think, very confining. And in fact, it is for persons who have both an MFT license and an LPC license, it creates conflict because the LPC board has ruled that it's a dual relationship with the LPC license. So it is puts them into a very difficult situation. And if an LPC wants to get a PLLC, they really can't do it because part of getting a PLLC means that you cannot have coaching as part of a LPC PLLC. But if you are an LMFT, you can have coaching as part of it. So it really creates difficulties for them. Now, I realize that's not a lot of people, but I think that the LMFT board needs to be conscious of all of their members and needs to be aware of the fact that they're the only board in the whole country that thinks that they can regulate coaching, and that it really is an issue that should be left to, different certifications, or should not be something that's regulated by the government. I'll just say that. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Clement. Does the board have any questions for Ms. Clement or? Okay.
I don't have questions for Ms. Clement. I just need clarification on what our options are for action or inaction for this particular petition.
So you can grant the petition, which would be essentially to say, to instruct staff to propose the rule as petitioned. We would draft a rule like you usually see with the language struck through, and we take it to the next council meeting. You can deny the petition, and that denial could be just deny, we don't want to talk about this again, or it can be deny, but instructions to staff to please pursue we're going to pursue our rule anyway at the council, but you could instruct us to study it more or bring it to a committee, things like that. Any action like that would still have to be with a denial on the petition itself.
In the petition, she also brings up number 8 about mediation. And I would be really curious, and I don't know if there's like how we would do this exactly, but I would be very curious to hear what other stakeholders think about both of these points, number 8 and number 21. I do know that there are therapists that become mediators. And I would be curious to hear what other licensees think about being mediators and therapists, if that does feel like a tug. And I think that's part of what she's pointing to in the letter of petition. So I don't know what that would look like. Does that mean denial and then we let our stakeholders tell us? What does that look like?
Yeah, you could just invite comment through this meeting and ask for comment. We could survey somehow. I will say the one point of clarification. And this is where respectfully, Ms. Clement and I just disagree about how the law and the rules work. I we as the council do not believe that the presence of life coaching inherently creates a dual relationship under either the LPC or MFT license, any of the licenses. What occurs for both life coaching and mediation in those rules is that it's saying when you as a licensee are conducting any of these types of services, you are doing so under the auspice of your license. And the reason that functionally has to make sense is that as you are doing your services, think of any number of things that you do that you could do with an individual without any license whatsoever. Scheduling meetings, greeting them at the door, filling out paperwork, billing insurance, doing any sorts of things. That the act itself is not a provision of marriage and family services of the literal definition of marriage and family therapy. But clearly you are doing those things as part of the professional relationship that is under your license. And so if there were to be misrepresentation or fraud or assault or any number of bad actions while those things happen, a licensee could not say, oh, well, but at that moment, I was not wearing my license hat. I was just providing paperwork like any old Joe can. That's not the provision of marriage and family therapy. Marriage and family therapy is only when we were literally talking about the therapeutic relationship, or I was only when I was giving the assessment, not even when I was grading the assessment, because you can have some assessments where other associates grade, depending on which one it is. Right. So that's where our position as the council is you cannot divide up the services to that minute degree. All of it is encompassed when you're wearing your licensing hat. So
Would you mind sharing a bit more about the proposal that staff has created about the ability to disclaim your license if you want to, what that would look like and how that might be different from what the implications are of this rule petition?
sure. And so what that would look like is saying in our enforcement rules, essentially, is saying when there is a complaint about a certain conduct or statement, if that conduct or action could have been done without a license under some other authority, whether it be life coaching or whatever else, then we will say we don't have jurisdiction if one of two things are true. If it was made completely outside of professional relationship and no reasonable person would have thought it was a professional relationship, then that's not in our purview. So that's the social media tweets. Like if a licensee wants to say something and it's wildly inaccurate on the Twitter space, that's their political prerogative. We're not regulating that. The other option is if you have, and I don't remember the language exactly, but if you fully disclaim that you're using your license and you get acknowledgement from a client in writing, hey, I am not providing you marriage and family therapy services. And with that client, before and after that moment, you have not otherwise provided marriage and family therapy services. Then we can say, that's fine. You have taken that hat off. You told them so. You got it in writing, and you never put that hat back on. Then it's outside our jurisdiction.
I can see that as a very useful remedy for therapists licensed in Texas as LMFTs who want to practice outside the state, but are not licensed in another state. So they're going to take off their LMFT hat and say, now I'm being a coach, and they can now practice across jurisdictional lines with no consequences, correct?
We couldn't have done anything about that anyway.
Right, because they'd be subject to the other state's laws.
Thank you.
Can I see if this illustrates what you might be proposing? If I'm an LMFT, oh, I am. As an LMFT, if I wanted to do life coaching as a side gig or another component, I would create 2 websites. One website is I'm licensed. Here's how you can verify my license, and I do therapy. And it has my degrees and it has my licensure and all that information. That's website 1. Website 2 has all my name and my degrees, but no license information. That basically focuses in on I do life coaching, specifically say I don't do therapy. And each of those websites has its own informed consent, which spells out the distinction. That I could even have 2 business cards. One business card says, here's my therapy business card that has my license information. Here's my life coaching that lists my degree, but not anything about licensure. Is that kind of what the practical implication might look like?
Yes, yes. And that you then carry out those 2 functions in a manner that reasonable people would understand are separate. Where you might start getting into trouble, just for folks who are thinking down this path, is if you bring in someone come in as an introductory client under the marriage and family therapy sessions, and you do a few sessions, and then you say, oh, you know what, you really just need life coaching. And by the way, I happen to have this other business that's a life coach. Why don't you come over here and now you'll just be under the life coach. And that's a completely different set of services. There are much more risks in that scenario that you have created a dual relationship or that you have not effectively taken off your MFT hat. So we're saying we should give people an avenue, but it is a very clear avenue. If you start muddying the waters, we're not going to guarantee that you're not subject to our jurisdiction.
Well, and my understanding in previous discussions, because we've certainly talked about this at length as a board, is that then if later on a complaint was made to the board, it is the burden of the licensee to prove that everything you did was life coaching and never touched an MFT systemic topic. Is that correct? You have to be very ready to defend yourself.
Generally speaking, yes.
Okay.
Which would be challenging because we are required to chart and to take notes of sessions as a licensee. As a life coach, there's no obligation to produce any kind of note, any kind of document other than what might show up on my calendar as an appointment slot. So trying to prove that would be, I think, challenging.
Which is why the rule suggestion is that you would need that consent in writing up front, that you are receiving life coaching, not marriage and family therapy, to then justify why you don't have any logs. That would help explain.
And it would require, I think, a tremendous amount of maturity on the part of the therapist to not insert any therapy into a life coaching situation. Because we're trained first as therapists and we go down that pathway. And then adding this other dimension is going to require specific intentionality to steer clear of therapeutically driven approaches, strategies.
Yeah, I think we sometimes, I think I think we need clarity about the difference between life coaching and marriage and family therapy. And that difference generally lies in diagnosis and treatment. That life coaches cannot diagnose and life coaches cannot treat mental or relationship health issues.
Right.
So, anyways. And I would hope that they would include that in their informed consent whenever they are explaining the difference between life coaching and therapy if somebody does opt to do both.
Good. I will go on record as saying, and I thought I saw Ms. Clement's hand up, maybe, that I've never been a fan of having the life coaching terminology in this,
Oh,
just
yes.
for this reason, that life coaching has a perception of being a standalone industry, not a strategy of helping somebody navigate through through their life situation.
Okay, then I'll ask the question. I understand what, as you've explained the implications of the disclaimer route. What are the implications of the route as proposed by Ms. Clement's petition?
So, pardon me. The implications, and certainly I encourage Ms. Clement's hand was up if you'd like to engage with her. The removing life coaching or mediation from the definition of marriage and family therapy services would essentially be saying when someone does either of those practices, that is not within the purview of the board or the council. That is, whether you hold a license or not, those are essentially free practices that anyone can do. And so therefore, we are not going to look at that at all. That an analogy could be drawn to some of, say, business practices. Our rules do not regulate what kind of businesses people form, LLCs or PLCs or whatever else. Because anyone can form those. It's not really, even though our licensees do regularly form them, it's not really something we consider within our jurisdiction. But we do consider fraud and misrepresentation when you do those things, if it's part of your practice, is within our bailiwick. The difficulty would be defining when did therapeutic services stop and mediation start, and when did life coaching start versus stop. And so even if you took it out, I think we'd still need to define some way of understanding when can somebody say, well, yes, we were in the middle of a MFT session, but then we got into life coaching. I wasn't really doing it. That's where it gets a little tricky.
And one of the things that's interesting with that is, when you're doing couple therapy, you have informed consent by both. If you're going to shift to individual therapy, then you, in essence, terminate couple therapy and initiate individual therapy with a new informed consent agreement that now you are doing individual therapy and you are no longer doing couple therapy. And that is a routine practice to provide that type of a distinction. Okay? Or vice versa. If you're doing individual therapy and then they want to start couple therapy, then you terminate individual therapy and you create a couple therapy dynamic. And that could be the same type of thing that could happen with life coaching. If you're doing therapy with someone and then they want to switch into life coaching, or you cross state lines or whatever it is, that you would officially terminate the therapeutic relationship and create a life coaching relationship with its own boundaries and parameters and informed consent as to what you're going to receive under life coaching. And so then once you formally terminate the therapy session, then that makes it much more easy to differentiate what someone is doing. If you don't terminate that relationship, then it has the potential of being a little bit diffuse across the boundaries with that.
Will the board hear Attorney Clement?
Patrick, did you have something you wanted to say first?
I just wanted to add, try to keep it as brief as possible. I look at the 80142, I think is the rule we're talking about here, and it's more of the an explanation of the scope of potential services that an MFT can provide. And so it's not an exhaustive list, right? So just because something's not listed here doesn't necessarily mean it's not necessarily the practice of marriage and family therapy. But taking the mediation example, I mean, I could imagine as a, if you're providing couple like marital counseling, there's going to be some mediation going on between the husband and wife. And so there's some elements of mediation happening. And so I would look at it as, is this help describe and accurately describe many of the duties and activities that a marriage and family therapist would do? And if so, it's helpful, right, to that explanation. So, I mean, again, deleting it doesn't mean they're not necessarily going to be doing those services, right? I mean,
we can hear from Ms. Clement now.
Yeah, Ms. Clement, feel free to unmute yourself.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Mediation is described and controlled by the Civil Practice and Remedies Code. And of course, courts are the ones that fuel mediation. So mediation is defined in the code. And you've generally got two attorneys involved, you've got two litigants involved, you've got a mediator involved. And if you really think about it, the mediator, if it is an LMFT, are they really going to have two attorneys and two litigants become clients? I mean, do you really think that those two attorneys are going to want to have the mediator as their therapist just for a mediation session that's going to be 8 hours long? And are we going to really develop a treatment plan? Are we really going to have notes taken? The purpose of the mediation is very well lined out in by the Civil Practice and Remedies Code. And I think that really what is written in the LMFT code is really somewhat different than what is meant in the Civil Practice and Remedies Code. And also with respect to informed consent, I mean, most life coaches do have informed consent, and they do outline what they do and the fact that they don't provide therapy and that what their responsibilities are. So I think that I think it's a great idea to encourage people to use informed consent, to talk about what they do. But I think that most life coach certification programs provide or discuss the informed consent and let the customer know, let the customer know exactly what they're getting for the money that they're paying. So any questions?
Any questions from board members? Okay, thank you, Ms. Clement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any further questions or discussion? I think my personal thought is that I guess my recommendation is that I would be disinclined to move forward with making any changes at this point in time. I think I'd really like to see what our attorneys produce, and maybe we will revisit this after they have had an opportunity to write some new rules. I don't know, to maybe come back and revisit this in the future, but for now, I would deny this request.
I so move.
Is there any seconds? Are you seconding, Russ? I'm not sure.
No, I'm going to go for comment.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I need a
After
second
the
first.
motion has been approved, then we can go into comment.
Yes.
Second, Lee Hampton.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I've got some comment.
Yes.
Just a procedural matter before we approve this. Do we need to approve or disapprove this? And if we do not vote in favor of this, then this document dies. And y'all are still working on something anyway, right? Okay. if we, does it necessitate us to approve this and have it go through a process of being redlined and marked up and all that kind of stuff? Is that a procedural matter that needs to happen?
If you,
Procedurally, under the Administrative Procedures Act, there's once the petition for rulemaking is filed with an agency, they have to make a decision within a certain number of days. If not, then if not, they have to take one or two options. It's either they have to deny it or they have to initiate rulemaking proceedings. So they would have to initiate rulemaking proceedings pursuant to this request. Just denying it, though, doesn't necessarily mean, like Robert was talking about, there could be other things. Staff can look into it, bring it back to the next board meetings, other options, as well as he spoke about how at the BHIC meeting, we're going to be talking about some potential rule change to address this. So, but yeah, procedurally, what has to happen is there has to be either an approval or a denial. That's kind of what staff needs to move forward on it.
and if you approved it, we would immediately draft a proposed rule that would go to the council that would get posted in the register.
Which is kind of what y'all are kind of
We're already doing, and we'll,
wordsmithing
and
now.
regardless of this,
Okay.
we'll pursue our rule change anyway.
Okay.
But to Patrick's point, you can always, even if you vote to deny, you can instruct us to bring this draft as a proposed rule to you for discussion at your next meeting. Or a rules committee. Yeah, you can tell us.
And just to be clear, the motion is to decline the petition. And
Correct.
it doesn't preclude you from using that as input into your deliberations around what you're doing.
Correct.
Good. And that's the procedure. I was just, I don't want this to die. You know, but then again, you guys are smart and y'all are already ahead of the game with all this. And I just didn't know if there was a procedural thing, since this has to be thumbs up or thumbs down, if that would influence you in any way. So, okay, good.
Yeah, I think Ms. Clement brings up some really good points. I just think that I personally want to see, because y'all are bringing this new rule change to the February 18th meeting. Is that correct? Like, I just want to kind of see that process before once that rule is in effect, then let's revisit this issue and see if maybe we don't need mediation, if we don't need, I'd like to revisit the issue once we have the rule established. So, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion? All those not in favor of the motion? All those abstaining? You deny it. Okay, so you're in favor of denying? Okay, never mind. Then it's unanimous. Okay. Moving on to
Chair Merchant, before we do that, might I inquire?
Do we need a break?
No,
Oh.
did we approve the minutes from the previous meeting? I think that was agenda item 1, and I don't recall that we did it. So I just
don't
want to,
think we did do it.
okay.
We did not.
Oh, wait a minute. It's not on my agenda.
It is not on this
It is on
agenda.
number 1. It says includes roll call and
Oh.
excused absence and approval of minutes. Yeah, it's very tiny.
Sorry. Okay, well then, moving back to agenda item number 1. Is there any discussion of the minutes? Yeah, exactly. Y'all prepare for another 2-hour meeting. Anyways. Okay, agenda item number 1, approval of minutes from the previous meeting.
I so approve or
Make a motion?
Well, I move, yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion of the minutes? Okay, then all those in favor of approving the minutes from the previous meeting? That's unanimous. Thank you, Jody. Okay, agenda item number, I think we're on 12. Number 12, discussion and possible action to finalize and implement a survey regarding continuing education. As Dr. Barty mentioned earlier, we developed this through the Professional Development Committee, and our goal is basically, we just want to understand kind of the experiences that licensees are having related to continuing education. What is really, truly helpful? What is not helpful? Are there different types of CEs that are more helpful than others? Like, we just want to understand their experience so that we can be better rule makers, you know? So my hope is that today, if there's any changes, be those significant changes or, minor changes, that I can make those before February 1st. My goal is to have this sent out to licensees around February 1st, and then to end data collection around March 15th, and then hopefully have the results to you guys in time for our April board meeting. I will also be presenting at TAMFT, and I'm hoping to maybe bring a QR code with me to TAMFT and walk around and let people scan it and hopefully take the survey there. I'm hoping that we can, if we get 100 people to fill it out, I think that would be fantastic. We have like 5,000 licensees, so, maybe 100 will do it. So we'll see. Anyways, any questions or comments, or it was in your packet. Yes.
Just a quick comment that this has gone through a couple of revisions.
Yes.
And each time it gets better and better. Thank you, Sarah. Each time it gets better and better with all this. And so I like this final draft.
This is Jody Elder, and I want to reiterate that. I think this is an excellent idea. Just actually surveying our stakeholders is a fabulous idea. I just wanted to ask some logistical questions. Number 7, do we then change that wording to reflect the new cultural diversity wording, or are we not yet there yet because of, I think that might make an impact on responses here.
The problem is it won't even be proposed until midway through the survey. It won't be adopted until well after the survey is.
Okay, so we can't change it yet. Okay.
Well, no, we can change language we can soften, we can use the proposed language. This is not.
We do have we have one on there that says cultural diversity and competency. And then a few down, we have population based.
Currently. with that. Yeah.
Or at least I think we do, unless I'm making that up. Okay.
I think we roll the dice and see what we get,
Okay.
because we might get a lot of write-in comments as, what? And which would be interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then another question is, I really like that the survey asks their opinion a lot. And one of the things that I think we as a board have gotten tons of feedback on is this 50% rule. But we don't ask their opinion specifically about that rule.
Yeah.
We ask, how difficult is it to understand who can provide CEs? But I would like to see us ask specifically, how confusing is this part of the rule? Because we have a decision to make as a board of whether we're going to repeal that or not. And I would like to see the data about that specific piece.
Okay. So there is a
Question
question.
16. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Question 16 is how difficult is it to understand who can provide continuing education? And one of the options is, I haven't read in 801.206F, the list of types of providers. So they have an opportunity to select. And then number 17 is, what other thoughts would you like to share? So I imagine that might be top of mind
Okay.
when they get to 17.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just want to make sure we know. I want us to have the data that we need in order to make a decision about that specific piece.
Yeah, that was question number 16 was, and maybe there's a different way to word it better, but that was my intention, was how confusing that's what I wanted to know, is how confusing is it? But I just asked, I think I used the word understand instead, but just trying to understand if they are confused by what counts as within that 50% or what doesn't.
So we're saying if we were to get lots of feedback that it's confusing, then the conclusion we're drawing is they don't like it and they want us to get rid of it. Because I thought like maybe we add a question that says, should we retain, in your opinion, should we retain the 50% rule or not?
Would they answer that as, like, what would we replace it with? I mean, like, because they could be thinking, oh, well, maybe it should be 75%. I don't think anybody would think it'd be 75%.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Or maybe they get, or should only be 25%, or, I mean, yeah. I mean, I think there's maybe people who would agree with that, but thinking back to like the 50% rule, like, we do sometimes get pushback on that. We get very little pushback on that, to be honest. Whenever we first rolled it out, I think there was confusion. But my conversations with stakeholders nowadays is most people are not confused because it is so broad. That 50% is so broad. And the list of things that are not on the 50% are, you can't go read a book. You only get 1 hour for reading a book. Like you can't, I don't know, the list of things that are providers that are not on that 50% are very small. And it's mostly the things that are listed elsewhere in the rule, like, preparing for a presentation or, things like that would, I don't know. Does that kind of make sense? I don't know.
No, it does.
I also think that the staff has been very patient when they've done it's on. Yeah. It's just not in my mouth. I also think the staff has been very patient every time they do the meet the staff. I feel like that question comes up probably at least once, and you guys have patiently answered that a lot. And I think it seems like, and I could be wrong, but it seems like the amount of those questions are going down the more you like over time, or maybe not.
We'll know the next leadership listening hour.
But basically, if an hour has been vetted in some form or fashion, it's probably going to count on that 50% rule if it's been vetted in some way.
So if this is approved today, what would be a reasonable timetable for it to be distributed?
Hopefully February 1st is the goal.
Is that?
Yes, I'm
That
sorry.
good?
You couldn't hear me nod my head. Yes.
I heard the nod.
The rattle.
Thank
This
you.
is sent out to all the
And
licensees.
is there a time frame?
Yeah, February 15th or February 1st to March 15th.
March 15th. Got it.
Mm.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay. Any other questions or? Okay, then is there a motion for us? Do we need a motion? Or do we just, okay, is there a motion for us to send out the survey?
I move we send out the survey. This is Barbara Ezel.
May I have a second?
Nicole Richardson seconds it.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of sending out the survey? That is unanimous.
Good work on this.
Okay. Okay, agenda item number 13, recommendations for agenda items for the next meeting.
Survey results.
Survey results. Yeah.
Language regarding life coaching.
Language regarding life coaching. I think there'll be a lot. I feel like we mentioned some other things earlier in the meeting. I just can't think of what they are right now.
Supervisor survey.
Supervisor survey. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Any other recommendations for agenda items for the next meeting? Okay. Then I think we are down to adjournment. Oh, yes.
His last meeting, we did public comments before and after.
Oh,
Did we not? Did we not?
We did.
I was thinking,
Does the board want to hear additional public comment?
I don't know. I was just thinking that we done that before. I didn't know if that was a,
I think we were moving it
One
around
and
and trying
done?
it in different spots.
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, if y'all want to hear public comment again, we can do public comment again. Okay. Well, then we will open the floor back for public comment. I know. Look at Robert.
Have no one in the room. Anyone who is attending by computer, if you'd use the raised hand feature, you can find the raised hand at the bottom of your navigation bar. Seeing no raised hands and only our staff is attending by phone, that concludes our second session of public comment.
Okay. Thank you.
Before we conclude, I just have to ask, is this your official last meeting or are you going to continue to serve for the legislative session, Russ?
I think the precedent is to continue until
Okay, good.
someone has
Taking his spot.
slotted in. And I'm hoping that someone listening out there would be so inclined to maybe
Yeah.
petition to
Well,
be appointed.
let me just go on record as
Oh.
saying, I hope you're not replaced and I hope to see you in April. Bye.
Talk to my wife about that, and okay, so, thank you.
Okay, any other further comments, discussion, anything else that needs to be said? Okay, then let's move on to agenda item number 14. May I have a motion?
I motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, then the meeting is adjourned at 3:32.
I think we have to approve a motion to adjourn.
Yay.